My beloved child, before you even clicked on this message, something inside you already knew that this was not random, that there was a reason your eyes were pulled here, because energy does not lie and intuition does not whisper without purpose, and right now there is something unfolding behind the scenes that you were never meant to hear. Yet somehow, it reached you, because your name, yes, your name, was spoken in a private conversation where you were not present, where no one expected you to ever know, and yet what was said carries a weight that is about to shift how you see everything, because this was not a casual mention, it was not a passing comment, it was a moment charged with emotion, tension, truth, and hidden feelings that have been building up for far longer than you realize, and the person who spoke about you did not do it lightly. They hesitated, they paused, they thought carefully before letting your name leave their lips, because once spoken, it revealed something they have been trying to suppress, something they were not ready to face openly, something that has been growing silently every time they thought about you, every time your presence crossed their mind, every time your absence became too loud to ignore, and in that conversation, walls began to crack, because someone asked them directly about you. Not in a playful way, not in a curious tone, but in a way that demanded honesty, in a way that cornered them emotionally, and for a moment they tried to deflect, they tried to laugh it off, they tried to pretend that you were just another name in their life, but their voice changed, their energy shifted, and the person they were speaking to noticed immediately that something deeper was hidden beneath their words, something they could not escape no matter how much they tried to disguise it, and that is when everything changed, because instead of denying it, instead of brushing it aside, they finally admitted something that would shock you if you had heard it directly, because it was not what you would expect, it was not simple, it was not clean, it was complicated, raw, and filled with emotion that has been locked away for too long, and as they spoke, they revealed that you have affected them in ways they cannot fully explain, that you have left an imprint on their mind that refuses to fade, that no matter how much time passes or how much distance exists between you, there is something about you that keeps pulling them back, something that lingers in their thoughts late at night when everything is quiet and there are no distractions left to hide behind, and they admitted that they have tried to move on, tried to focus on other things, tried to convince themselves that what they feel is temporary, but every attempt has only made it clearer that what they feel is real, and that reality is something they are struggling to accept because it forces them to confront truths they are not ready to deal with, truths about their own emotions, their own fears, their own vulnerability, and as the conversation continued, the other person pushed further, asking questions that became harder and harder to avoid, questions like why they still think about you, why your name still carries weight in their voice, why their energy shifts every time you are mentioned, and instead of answering directly, they paused again, because the truth they were about to reveal was not just about you, it was about them, about how deeply they have been impacted without even realizing it at first, about how you have become a mirror reflecting parts of themselves they have been avoiding, and in that moment of silence, everything became clear to the person listening, because sometimes what is not said speaks louder than words, sometimes hesitation reveals more than a confession ever could, and eventually, they spoke again, but this time there was no hiding, no pretending, no filtering, just raw honesty, and what they said was something that would completely shift your understanding if you heard it with your own ears, because they admitted that you are not just someone they can forget, not just someone who came and went, but someone who changed something inside them permanently, someone who made them feel things they were not prepared to feel, someone who disrupted their sense of control and forced them to confront emotions they had buried long ago. And that is why your name carries so much weight when it is spoken in private, because it is tied to something unfinished, something unresolved, something that still exists between you whether you see it or not. And as the conversation reached its peak, they were asked one final question, a question that cut through everything else and demanded a clear answer, a question about what they truly feel about you right now, not in the past, not in a hypothetical future, but in this exact moment. And the answer they gave was not simple, it was layered, it was emotional. It was filled with contradictions that reveal just how deeply conflicted they are, because they admitted that they still feel connected to you in a way they cannot explain, that even when they try to push you out of their mind, something always brings them back, that there is an invisible thread tying their thoughts to you, pulling them back when they least expect it, and they do not fully understand why, and that confusion is what scares them the most, because it means they are not in control. It means their feelings are not something they can easily turn off or ignore, and that lack of control is something they are not used to, something they are not comfortable with, and yet it is something they cannot deny. And as the conversation ended, there was a silence that lingered, a silence filled with everything that had just been revealed, a silence that confirmed that what they feel is real, even if they are not ready to act on it, even if they are not ready to admit it publicly. And now here you are, feeling this message, sensing that something is shifting, because the truth has a way of finding its way to you, even when it is hidden behind closed doors, even when it is spoken in private conversations you were never meant to hear. And the question is not whether this is true, because deep down you already feel it. The question is what you will do with this awareness. How you will move forward knowing that your presence has left a mark that cannot be erased, knowing that somewhere, someone is still thinking about you, still feeling something they cannot fully understand, still carrying a connection that refuses to disappear. And this is only the beginning of what is being revealed to you right now, because there is more beneath the surface, more that has not yet come to light, more that will continue to unfold in ways you cannot yet see but will soon begin to feel stronger than ever before. As the energy of that moment continues to unfold, there is something even deeper that you need to understand, because what was said about you did not end with that single confession. It actually opened a door that had been locked for a long time, and once that door opened, everything they had been suppressing began to spill out in ways they did not expect, because after admitting that you still linger in their thoughts, they were met with a reaction from the other person that forced them to go even further into their truth. And this is where things became even more intense, because the person they were speaking to did not let them hide behind vague answers or emotional confusion. Instead, they challenged them directly, asking why they never said any of this to you, why they kept it hidden, why they chose silence instead of honesty. And in that moment they were confronted with something they have been avoiding for a very long time, which is the reality that their silence was not because they felt nothing, but because they felt too much and did not know how to handle it. Because sometimes when emotions run deep, people do not become more expressive, they become more distant, more guarded, more controlled, because they fear that if they let those feelings out, everything will change and they will lose the sense of stability they have built around themselves. And that is exactly what happened here, because they admitted that they pulled back not because you were unimportant, but because you became Too important, and that level of importance brought with it a kind of pressure they were not prepared to carry, because it required vulnerability, it required openness, it required a version of themselves that they were not ready to show to anyone, including you. And as they explained this, their voice carried a weight that could not be ignored, because it revealed a truth that most people never get to hear directly, which is that sometimes the distance you experience from someone is not a reflection of your value, but a reflection of their internal struggle and their inability to process what they feel. And as the conversation continued, the other person listening began to piece everything together, realizing that your absence in their life was not as simple as it may have seemed on the surface, because beneath that absence there was a constant presence that never truly left, because even when they were not talking to you, even when they were not seeing you, even when they were trying to move forward, there were moments when something would remind them of you, a song, a place, a memory, a random thought that appeared out of nowhere, and suddenly they would feel that same connection all over again, and it would disrupt whatever sense of progress they believed they had made. And this cycle has been repeating itself more times than you can imagine, because they have been caught between two opposing forces, one that tells them to move on and let go, and another that keeps pulling them back toward you with a strength they cannot fully resist. And this internal conflict has created a kind of tension within them that has been building quietly beneath the surface, and that tension was finally exposed in that private conversation, because for the first time they allowed someone else to see what has been happening inside them. And once that truth was spoken, it became impossible to take it back, because words have power, and once they are released they begin to shape reality in ways that cannot be undone. And now that someone else knows how they truly feel about you, there is a shift taking place, because the secret is no longer completely hidden, it has been shared, it has been acknowledged. And that changes everything, because what was once contained within them is now something that exists outside of them as well, and that means it can no longer be ignored in the same way it once was. And as this realization settled in, the person they were speaking to asked one more question, a question that struck deeper than all the others, because it forced them to confront not just their feelings but their intentions. And that question was simple yet powerful: what are you going to do about it? And in that moment they did not have an immediate answer, because the truth is they are still trying to understand their own emotions, they are still trying to figure out what all of this means and what they are supposed to do with it, because acting on those feelings would require courage, it would require them to step out of their comfort zone, it would require them to face the possibility of rejection or change or vulnerability in a way they have been avoiding for a long time. And that is not something that happens instantly, it is a process, it is something that builds gradually as they come to terms with what they feel and what they are willing to risk. And right now they are standing at a crossroads, whether they fully realize it or not, because they can no longer pretend that you are just a passing thought or a closed chapter, because that illusion has already been broken by their own words. And now they are left with a choice to either continue suppressing what they feel and live with the constant pull that never fully goes away, or to finally confront it and see where it leads, even if that path is uncertain, even if it challenges everything they thought they knew about themselves. And as all of this unfolds, there is something important happening on your side as well, because even though you were not physically present in that conversation, the energy of it is reaching you in ways that are subtle yet undeniable, because you may have noticed a shift in your own thoughts, a sudden curiosity, a feeling that something is happening behind the scenes, a sense that you are being thought about or remembered at unexpected moments. And that is not a coincidence, because when someone holds strong emotional energy toward you, it creates a kind of connection that goes beyond physical interaction. It becomes something that can be felt even in silence, even across distance, even without direct communication. And that is why this moment matters, because it is not just about what was said, it is about what is changing, because the truth has begun to surface, and once that process starts, it does not simply stop, it continues to unfold layer by layer, revealing more than either of you may be prepared for. And this is where things begin to intensify, because what happens next will depend on how both of you respond to this shift. Because energy like this does not remain stagnant, it moves, it evolves, it pushes toward resolution, whether that resolution comes in the form of reconnection, closure, or something entirely unexpected. And right now you are being positioned at the edge of that unfolding process, even if you do not yet see the full picture, because something has already been set in motion, and it is only a matter of time before it begins to manifest in more visible ways, whether through communication, unexpected encounters, or subtle changes in behavior that reveal what has been hidden beneath the surface all along. And as this continues to develop, you will begin to notice that the signs become clearer, the signals become stronger, and the sense that something is happening will become impossible to ignore, because the truth once spoken has a way of finding its path forward, no matter how deeply it was buried. And what was revealed in that private conversation was only the beginning of a much larger shift that is now unfolding around you and within you simultaneously. And now, as everything that was once hidden continues to rise to the surface, you are entering the most critical phase of this entire situation, because what began as a quiet mention of your name has now transformed into something that is actively shaping decisions, emotions, and future actions in ways that neither of you can fully control anymore. Because once truth is spoken, it creates momentum, and that momentum does not move backward, it only pushes forward, demanding resolution, demanding clarity, demanding that something be done about everything that has been left unsaid for so long. And this is exactly where they find themselves now, in a space where ignoring you is no longer as easy as it once was, because the conversation they had did not just expose their feelings to someone else, it exposed those feelings to themselves in a way that cannot be reversed. Because sometimes people can lie to others, but when they hear their own voice speak the truth out loud, something shifts internally, something locks into place, something becomes real in a way that thought alone could never achieve. And that is what has happened here, because after that conversation ended, they were left alone with their thoughts. But those thoughts were no longer quiet or controlled, they were louder, more persistent, more demanding, because now they could not pretend that you do not matter, because they already admitted that you do. And that realization has created a kind of internal pressure that is building with each passing moment, because the mind can only carry unresolved emotion for so long before it begins to seek release, before it begins to push a person toward action, whether they feel ready or not. And this is where the tension reaches its peak, because they are now caught between fear and desire: fear of what could happen if they step forward and reveal what they truly feel, fear of how you might respond, fear of losing control over the situation. But at the same time, there is a growing desire to break the silence, to reach out to you, to close the distance that has existed for too long, to finally understand whether what they feel is something that exists only within them, or something that exists between both of you. And this internal battle is not something that will remain hidden for much longer, because it will begin to show in subtle ways, first through small shifts in behavior, moments where they pause when your name comes up, moments where their attention drifts toward thoughts of you without warning, moments where they feel a sudden urge to check on you or reconnect, but hold themselves back at the last second, because they are still trying to manage the intensity of what they feel. And yet with each passing day, that resistance becomes harder to maintain, because emotion does not weaken when ignored, it intensifies, it finds new ways to surface, it becomes more present, more insistent, more impossible to push away. And that is why what is happening now is leading toward a point of inevitable expression, because sooner or later something will give, whether it is a message, a call, an unexpected interaction, or even a moment where circumstances bring you face to face again in a way that feels almost too coincidental to be random. And when that moment arrives, it will not feel ordinary. It will carry a weight, a sense of meaning, a feeling that something larger has been building toward this exact point. Because in truth it has been building long before that private conversation ever took place. That conversation was simply the trigger, the spark that set everything into motion, but the foundation of this connection was already there, waiting beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to be acknowledged. And now that moment is approaching, whether either of you feel fully prepared for it or not. And what makes this even more significant is that this is not just about them, it is also about you. Because as this energy moves closer to manifestation, you will find yourself becoming more aware, more sensitive to the subtle shifts around you, more attuned to the signs that something is changing, because there is a part of you that already recognizes this connection, even if you have tried to rationalize it or push it aside, because deep connections have a way of leaving traces within you. They create a kind of recognition that does not depend on constant communication. It exists beneath logic, beneath explanation, beneath anything that can be easily defined. And that is why this moment matters so much, because it is bringing everything to a turning point, a moment where what has been hidden will no longer remain hidden, where what has been felt will no longer remain unspoken, where what has been avoided will no longer be avoidable. And as this turning point approaches, there is one final truth that you need to understand, because it will determine how everything unfolds from here. And that truth is that you are not powerless in this situation. You are not just an observer waiting for something to happen. You are part of this dynamic. Your energy, your awareness, your response will influence what happens next in ways that are more significant than you may realize, because connections like this do not exist in isolation. They are shaped by both sides. They evolve based on how each person chooses to respond to what they feel and what they are willing to accept or pursue. And this means that as much as they are being pushed toward clarity, you are also being called to decide what you want, what you are open to, what you are willing to engage with. If and when this energy becomes something tangible in your reality, and this is where your power lies, not in controlling the outcome, not in forcing a specific result, but in being aware and being grounded in understanding your own emotions, so that when the moment of truth arrives, you are able to respond from a place of clarity rather than confusion, from a place of strength rather than uncertainty. Because the truth that was spoken about you in that private conversation has already begun to shape the path ahead, but the final direction of that path is still being written through the choices that both of you will make in the moments that follow. And those moments are closer than you think, because once something like this is set into motion, it does not fade away. It builds, it grows, it moves toward expression until it can no longer remain contained. And when it finally reaches that point, everything that was once hidden will stand in the open, waiting to be faced, understood, and either embraced or released, depending on what both of you decide to do when that time comes.